Welcome to From the Quarries. A few months ago, we collectively produced a community video addressing the question, why stonemasons? This was a great success and came up with some really fascinating insights, and I think it's high time we put our collective minds towards another topic. So tonight's video, Freemasonry in the Modern World, has been chosen to put you, the audience, in the right frame of mind. The question for the next community video will be, where to from here? After more than 300 years of established and documented tradition, where should Freemasonry look to into the future? We live in challenging and fast-changing times. By asking the question, where to from here, I'm looking for your input about what you think the craft needs to do to remain both relevant and useful in a postmodern, post-capitalist world. The author of tonight's paper has put a lot of thought into this question and came up with some radical and challenging ideas, but I'm not going to share those with you just yet. Instead, the following presentation deals with his introduction to the topic and looks at the contemporary environment in which the craft finds itself, and how much this differs from the world of even 50 years ago. If you'd like to make a submission for inclusion in this community video, please share your thoughts in the comments section, or in the YouTube community, or on the From the Quarries website. The more detailed and comprehensive the better, and I'll be collating these to create a video in the run-up to the Christmas period. But first, to whet your appetites and get your minds ticking over, here is Cameron Mackay's introduction to his challenging essay, Freemasonry in the Modern World.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's presentation, From the Quarries, an archive of Masonic lore.
As we pass the millennium, any thoughtful Freemason recognizes that we face challenges which are fundamentally different in nature than those we've encountered in the past. Grand Lodge officers point with an alarm to an unprecedented decline in membership. Masters sense an attitude in both members and non-members that the craft is drifting towards a state of non-relevancy. Members note the decline of the craft's position, power, and prestige in the community. Some Masons sense that Freemasonry is headed towards extinction. Most feel we are in a state of great difficulty. Few, except those who are disinterested, claim that Freemasonry is not confronted with problems in the modern society. Although this essay is directed towards the problems of the craft in the modern society, it should not be supposed that it is aimed at proposing wholesale changes in the principles of Freemasonry. On the contrary, many of the changes which have been adopted in the past 2 decades appear to have done little to remedy the underlying problems confronting the craft. The United Grand Lodge of England, when faced with allegations of blood-curdling oaths, made alterations to the ritual. The craft, when charged with being secret and therefore sinister, strove to be more open and visible. The Lodge, when accused by certain Christian sects of being satanic, expended considerable effort to establish that practicing Christians could be Freemasons without compromising their religious beliefs. None of the foregoing stemmed the decline in membership or silenced the critics. This may be because we attempted to ameliorate groups who would never look at Freemasonry in a favourable light no matter what changes were adopted. It may also be that these outbursts against Freemasonry were complaints which had little or nothing to do with real problems which a modern society poses for Freemasonry. The real problem is not inherent in the principles of the craft at all. The current problems for Freemasonry may arise from the paradoxical nihilism which characterizes the modern society in which Freemasonry finds itself.
And slowly answered Arthur from the barge, "The old order changeth, yielding place to new, and God fulfills himself in many ways, lest one good custom should corrupt the world."
Prior to the Second World War, Western societies, within their own cultural enclaves, possessed a code of conduct, a repository of acceptable values, a system of sexual mores, and a set of religious beliefs which the mainstream of that society acknowledged and accepted. Some of these norms were enshrined in law. Some held the force of custom. Others were considered refinements of character or badges of distinction. Although variations existed from culture to culture, it was the implicit acceptance of these values as norms which formed both the glue and the identity of any given culture. It was on this foundation of accepted beliefs that the philosopher, businessman, bureaucrat, and tradesman planted his feet and looked out upon the universe, endeavouring to comprehend the mystery of his own consciousness. No doubt, in the process of cultivating and enlightening his mind, his beliefs would change. Those matters which he once considered universal absolutes may become relegated to cultural practices. Those values which he thought were minor or axiomatic may shift to become critical foundation stones in his perception of the truth. Irrespective of his degree of formal education, each individual could formulate his perception of reality by standing on a basic foundation which retained a degree of permanency and stability. Those who, by nature, were more philosophical probably stood on fewer stones, or maybe they had just dug down a little deeper. In any event, each individual had a cultural and philosophical foundation. This foundation was indelibly printed in his mental thought process. It was the categorical imperative, to borrow from Kant, from which the mind commenced its journey to formulate and understand the world. In that type of environment, Freemasonry could flourish. There were certain values which had a universal quality which transcended cultures. Agreed, there was much room for debate as to which matters stood on that list. They had to be truths which had stood the test of time, or, in Masonic terminology, they were principles which had existed since time immemorial. It was the Freemason's task to analyse his world and determine in his own mind which truths had that universal quality. These, then, would form the cornerstones of his temple. As he progressed through the degrees of Masonry, he would probably find this search for universal truths to be more and more elusive. But it was the duties of the leaders of the craft to assist him in that research, or to draw aside their veil, therefore, or more properly speaking, penetrate through it, and, by a careful and appropriate attention to them, he may hope ultimately to become fully acquainted with all its mysteries. In fact, Freemasonry did not profess to be the possessor of the ultimate truth. As the Mason progressed to the level of a Master Mason, he was constantly reminded that we did not possess the genuine secrets, that our secrets were merely the substitute secrets, which we would employ until the genuine secrets were restored to us. This Masonic philosophical structure fit very nicely into a society which had a stable, permanent set of core values, which identified and bound the society as a whole. Freemasonry became a structure within which thoughtful men could cultivate an individual set of values, while, at the same time, becoming more articulate and aware of what matters were considered worth pursuing and what matters were not worth pursuing. Thoughtful men blossomed inside Freemasonry because they found it helped them to fulfill their own aspirations and meet the expectations society held for them. Sometime after the 1950s, we entered this modern society, which presents a completely different milieu. Our society became multicultural. The economy became global. Sexual mores, which at one time were agreed upon, became questioned and discredited. The very definition of a family unit as being a heterosexual union was altered. Suddenly it becomes politically incorrect to describe December the 25th as Christmas Day. Crime and punishment get transferred from the sphere of good and evil administered by the courts to medical problems best handled by psychologists. Right and wrong, good and evil are denigrated as outmoded philosophical models. The maelstrom of modern life becomes paradoxical and contradictory. As Marshall Berman states,
"To be modern is to find ourselves in an environment that promises adventure, power, joy, growth, transformation of ourselves and the world, and at the same time that threatens to destroy everything we have, everything we know, everything we are. Modern environments and experiences cut across all boundaries of geography and ethnicity, of class and nationality, of religion and ideology. In this sense, modernity can be said to unite all mankind. But it is a paradoxical unity, a unity of disunity. It pours us all into a maelstrom of perpetual disintegration and renewal, of struggle and contradiction, of ambiguity and anguish."
At the very roots of this post-industrial society, as part of its base genetic makeup, is an urge for development, a need for progress, a need for growth. To generate this growth, change becomes the critical, essential characteristic of postmodernism. Every year, the design of an automobile is changed. Every year, the fashion in clothes is redefined. Perfectly good buildings are imploded so that new buildings can be put up in their stead. Economic models are constantly being revisited and revised. The economic chain from manufacturer to wholesaler to distributor to retailer is completely dismantled and replaced by amorphous, constantly shifting relationships in which, at times, the manufacturer competes directly with his own retailer for the same customer. Everyone's trade or profession becomes relegated to the status of a product for sale. If constant change, this perpetual disintegration and renewal, is the first key to understanding present society, acceleration is the second. One technological advance is utilized to invent a second. The benefits derived from the first invention allow the second to emerge and be produced more quickly than the first. These two inventions in turn are combined to produce a third invention at an even greater rate of speed. Technological change breeds further technological change in geometric progressions which occur at an ever-increasing rate. In many respects, the techno-society mirrors an infestation of locusts run rampant with no natural predator in sight. It is not surprising that in this modern milieu, which is characterized by frenzied change, that the very foundations of a society, the core values, suffer a similar onslaught. As Karl Marx stated,
"All fixed, fast-frozen relationships, with their train of ancient and venerable prejudices and opinions, are swept away. All new formed ones become antiquated before they can ossify. All that is solid melts into the air. All that is holy is profaned."
If Marx's observation is correct, the obvious question is this: is Freemasonry going to melt into the air? If Freemasonry is going to be successful in recruiting members in the modern society, it seems essential that we have a clear, articulate idea to the effect that postmodernism has had on the men we hope to recruit. We need to understand their needs, their thinking, and their moral values. It is only when we have a clear conception of men in this modern society that we can effect changes in the way we practice Freemasonry. Since every individual is different, it is impossible to obtain a detailed picture of these modern men. There seem to be certain indefinable characteristics which are more or less common to them all. This rapidly changing society has produced men with little security. Experts predict that the average person will change careers at least 3 times during his working life. In many cases, this insecurity borders on disillusionment or simply quiet desperation. They have learned that what is here today is gone tomorrow. They have learned that long-term plans are futile because the constant flux inevitably outdates their plans. Why make long-term plans to become an air pilot? Tomorrow, they may all fly by remote-controlled computers. Short-term planning predominates. This modern man is tremendously mobile and transient. A substantial number of men move every 2 or 3 years as their job with the same corporation, or a different corporation, takes them on a globe-trotting expedition. They are nomads in the traditional sense of that word. Like the native Indian who followed the herds to gain a livelihood, modern man moves from opportunity to develop his career trajectory. Like capital in the global economy, he finds himself shifted to that part of the world where he is presently most needed. Since his residence in any one place is known in advance to be temporary, this affects his thinking and attitudes. He has neither the time nor the desire to form strong bonds of allegiance to a city or province. For the same reason, he is reluctant to become actively involved in the local service club or the local school board. In 2 years' time, he will not even be there, so it is difficult for him to justify heavy involvement. It is equally difficult for him to become emotionally involved, since he knows he will experience disappointment and grief when the inevitable and imminent move occurs. This knowledge of the transient nature of his existence directly affects his personal relationships. Aside from family ties, he often has few durable lifetime friendships. Most of his acquaintances he knows only in part. He knows his colleagues at work only to the extent it is necessary for needs arising out of their business relationship. He knows his postman simply as the postman. He knows nothing of the postman's wife, children, religion, likes or dislikes. Hence, most of his personal relationships are temporary, and he only knows and relates to a portion of that personality. These are neither lifetime friends or situations in which he knows and understands the person as a whole human being. Consequently, when the relationship no longer serves an economic or functional purpose, it can be terminated quickly and without any sense of loss or grief. This modern man, working in a fast-paced world, is always short of time. Despite the promises that high technology would lead to affluence and leisure, statistics show the contrary. White-collared workers are spending more and more hours doing things faster and faster. In 1970, a solicitor may have taken 2 or 3 days to draft a commercial lease. In 1998, the marketplace expects the same lease to be completed within 2 or 3 hours. The result of this increased pace is to place modern man in a position where it is more and more difficult to allot every second Thursday to a specific leisure activity. This rapid-paced transient economy has created another phenomenon. Lacking long-term ties to a specific organization, placed in a position where lifelong friendships are few and far between, and knowing that what exists today may be gone tomorrow, he becomes quite self-centric and leads towards immediate gratification. The BMW is leased today He does not save and upgrade over 20 years for the car of his dreams. Cars may not even exist in 20 years. He does not acquire material objects on the basis that they will be with him for decades and passed on to the succeeding generation. He rents a condominium in which the upkeep is taken care of. He acquires the latest fashions of pressboard furniture, and he acquires the latest CD pop music. His acquisitions presuppose that all will become obsolete in a very short period of time. The modern man deals in a global economy in which his business contacts involve people of every race, religion, and colour. Their nationality and religion are unimportant, providing the business can be conducted in an appropriate manner. This widened exposure makes him much more tolerant of cultural practices and different races than his forefathers. The foregoing is not intended to be an exhaustive list of the characteristics of the modern man. It is recognized that there are many countervailing characteristics which make the picture into a far more complex mosaic. However, the essential point is that Freemasonry has to be aware and to the best of its ability knowledgeable about the human condition in the techno-society before we can address the question of what changes we make in the way we practice Freemasonry.